Among a growing number of Canadians choosing to leave the United States behind. Real estate agents say they're also seeing an uptick in listings as Canadians look for new places to spend the winter.
2025, a lot of Canadians are selling. This is definitely the busiest I've ever been. I've never had this many listings.
For years, Canadian snowbirds were considered the backbone of Florida's seasonal economy. Every winter, tens of thousands of retirees and part-time residents would migrate south, drawn by the sun, lower cost of living, and a long-standing friendship between two countries. This wasn't just tourism. For many of these people, Florida was their second home, a lifestyle, a community they returned to year after year. They bought property, formed friendships with neighbors, contributed to local causes, supported businesses, and integrated into the rhythm of Florida life like seasonal locals. But now in 2025, that routine has collapsed. Canadians are pulling out of Florida in what appears to be not just a market correction, but a political statement. This year, tens of thousands of Canadians are staying home. Some have sold their Florida properties. Others have outright canceled long-standing rental agreements. Local businesses that depended on their seasonal return are seeing revenue plummet. Entire beachfront condo blocks once filled with Canadian retirees are eerily quiet. Real estate offices report that not only are Canadians not buying, they're rapidly pulling out. Restaurants, healthcare providers, grocery stores, even landscapers and cleaning companies are all sounding the alarm. The Canadians are gone. What's happening isn't just an economic event. It's not simply the result of high insurance premiums or rising real estate costs. It's not about the Canadian dollar being weak, though that doesn't help. What's happening is much deeper. It's political. It's emotional. And in many ways, it's personal. For many Canadians, the United States, once seen as a friendly neighbor, is now viewed as hostile, unstable, and unwelcoming. And at the center of that shift is one man, Donald Trump. For Canadians, Trump was never just an American political figure. He was a symbol of a dramatic change in tone, policy, and posture toward Canada itself. His presidency marked the most strained U.S.-Canada relationship in modern history. And what started as policy quickly turned into direct insults and aggressive rhetoric. In 2018, Trump imposed steel and aluminum tariffs on Canadian exports under the justification of national security. The idea that Canada, a NATO member, a military ally, a major trading partner, posed a security threat to the U.S. was more than confusing. It was insulting. And Canadians didn't forget. The Canadian government responded with retaliatory tariffs, but the broader response came from the people. According to polling at the time, Canadian trust in the U.S. plummeted. For snowbirds, many of whom had spent decades investing in Florida life, it sparked an uncomfortable question: were they still welcome? Trump's behavior didn't stop at trade. In press conferences and public comments, he frequently ridiculed Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. At the G7 summit, he famously called him very dishonest and weak. Later, at a NATO event, he labeled him two-faced. These weren't one-off comments, they were part of a pattern. Public global humiliation of an allied leader. Canadians were paying attention. And for many, these insults weren't just political jabs, they felt like personal attacks. But perhaps the most provocative line Trump crossed was his repeated suggestion, sometimes joking, sometimes not, that Canada shouldn't even be a sovereign country. On multiple occasions during campaign rallies and interviews between 2020 and 2024, Trump floated the idea of annexing Canada. At a major campaign event in Arizona in 2024, he told a cheering crowd, "We already control the oil, the water, the lumber. We might as well take the whole thing. Canada could be the 51st state." It got laughs. It got coverage. And in Canada, it got taken very seriously. To many Americans, this was just more Trump bravado. But to Canadians, it was dangerous talk. These comments were widely covered by Canadian media and sparked widespread backlash across all political affiliations. Conservative and liberal Canadians alike found it deeply disturbing. It wasn't just the words, it was the complete absence of condemnation from most American political figures. No one stepped up to say that's too far. No one pushed back. And in that silence, Canadians saw a message: your country doesn't matter. At first, the response was quiet. fewer Canadians searched for U.S. real estate in 2023. By 2024, those numbers had dropped by over 25%. In 2025, real estate agents across Florida, Arizona, and California say Canadian inquiries have fallen off a cliff. Worse, many who already own property are selling. Redfin, Zillow, and local MLS listings show a sharp increase in foreign-owned homes, especially Canadian-owned, being listed for sale. In Clearwater, one agent said he's had more Canadian listings in the first 3 months of 2025 than in the previous 2 years combined. The emotional weight of this shift is heavy. For many of these snowbirds, Florida was more than just a getaway. It was home. They had routines, weekly markets, beach walks, local diners where they were on a first-name basis with the staff. Now they're leaving. Not because of a single policy or a single moment, but because the feeling has changed. The warmth they once felt, both literal and metaphorical, has been replaced with uncertainty, discomfort, and in many cases, anger. The numbers alone are shocking, but the stories behind them are even more powerful. One Canadian couple from Ottawa who spent 22 consecutive winters in Florida recently sold their home in Sarasota. "We used to love it here," they told CBC. But the atmosphere changed. It started feeling less like a place to relax and more like a place we were barely tolerated. They cited the anti-immigrant tone, the rise in political extremism, and what they called the complete normalization of disrespect toward Canada as their primary reasons for leaving. They've since bought a small villa in the Algarve region of Portugal. Their story isn't unique. Across Reddit forums, Facebook snowbird groups, and Canadian retirement blogs, a pattern is emerging. People are sharing stories of plans canceled, properties listed, communities left behind. They're not just frustrated, they're hurt. And while inflation, insurance premiums, and real estate speculation play a role, those concerns were tolerable when the emotional connection to the U.S. was still intact. That connection is now broken. And this isn't just a Florida issue. Arizona, another snowbird hotspot, is experiencing the same pullback. Realtors in Mesa, Phoenix, and Tucson report that Canadian demand, once a bedrock of winter transactions, has cratered. In some cases, agents say the only Canadian clients they've spoken to this year are sellers, not buyers. In places like Palm Springs, California, and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, local tourism boards are seeing similar patterns. The decline in Canadian engagement isn't a regional hiccup, it's a nationwide retreat. Tourism data confirms it. Canadian bookings to U.S. destinations are down 31% compared to 2019 levels, and among long-stay visitors, the drop is even steeper. Travel agencies that used to specialize in Florida rentals are now pivoting to Southern Europe. One agency in Toronto said they've seen a 60% increase in demand for winter packages to Portugal and Spain compared to pre-pandemic years. These destinations are marketed as Florida alternatives, safe, sunny, affordable, and most importantly, free of American political noise. The economic consequences of this migration are already being felt in Florida. Seasonal rental income is drying up. Short-term vacation rentals that once had waitlists now offer discounts, incentives, and flexible terms, and still go unbooked. Property managers are reporting fewer Canadian tenants. One rental manager in Venice Beach said, "It used to be 70% Canadian renters every winter. This year? Maybe 10%. And the phones aren't ringing." But the domino effect goes further. When snowbirds pull out, it impacts an entire local economy. Fewer renters mean fewer cleaning crews hired, fewer landscaping jobs, less maintenance work. Grocery stores order less stock. Restaurants shorten their hours. Small tourist attractions, many of which rely on steady off-peak Canadian business, are cutting staff or closing temporarily. The loss isn't theoretical. It's already unfolding. Take this example. A typical Canadian couple renting in Florida for 4 months might spend $6,000 on housing, $4,000 on groceries and dining, $3,000 on excursions and entertainment, $2,000 on transportation, and another $5,000 on miscellaneous expenses like medical appointments, home services, and shopping. That's $20,000 to $25,000 per season, per couple. Now multiply that by just 50,000 missing snowbirds, and you're looking at over $1 billion vanishing from the local economy. And that's a conservative estimate. it also disrupts the healthcare system. Florida's seasonal healthcare infrastructure has long relied on Canadians who pay out of pocket for urgent care, dental procedures, physical therapy, and prescription refills. With fewer snowbirds, clinics are reporting reduced demand. One urgent care center in Naples said their Canadian patient volume has dropped by over 40% in just 2 seasons. That kind of drop isn't just a missed opportunity, it puts pressure on the entire business model. And then there's real estate. The Florida real estate market has grown accustomed to the seasonal rhythm, snowbirds buying in the fall, staying for winter, and sometimes selling in spring. Their purchasing power added consistency to what is otherwise a highly volatile market. Now, agents are struggling to fill the gap. As Canadian sellers exit, the buyer pool shrinks, and many of these homes, condos in particular, sit on the market longer than ever before. For years, Canadians were seen as the safe money in Florida real estate. They bought modestly, paid in cash, didn't flip, and rarely defaulted. They weren't speculative, they were stable. Losing them means losing not just dollars but reliability. In a market already plagued by rising insurance costs, flood zone anxieties, and climate uncertainty, that loss of stability adds a new layer of risk. Politically, this exodus represents more than a protest. It's a cultural turning point. Canadians, particularly older generations, have always had a strong emotional bond with the United States. They grew up on American television, traveled to New York or Las Vegas, crossed the border to shop in Buffalo or Detroit. They didn't see the U.S. as foreign. Many snowbirds would say, Florida feels more like home than Toronto in winter. That feeling is now gone. And it's not just because of Trump's words. It's also because of the silence that followed. When Trump called Trudeau weak or joked about annexing Canada, few American leaders pushed back. There were no formal condemnations, no bipartisan statements affirming Canada's sovereignty or the importance of the alliance. That absence of solidarity felt like a message in itself. To many Canadians, it confirmed that America, at least as represented by its political elite, no longer sees them as partners. Even now, Trump continues to hint at the same themes. In recent campaign stops, he's returned to criticizing Canada's energy policies, mocking Canadian social services, and even calling their military a joke. At a closed-door donor event in early 2025, one quote leaked to the press: "Canada can't defend itself. We're basically babysitting a country that should be paying rent." That quote was widely circulated in Canadian media, reigniting outrage, and once again prompting many to ask, why are we still spending our winters and our money there? What's striking is that this exodus didn't come with headlines or political statements. There was no viral boycott, no coordinated protest. Canadians didn't take to the streets or organize mass petitions. Instead, they just quietly backed away. They canceled plans. They sold homes. They stopped browsing listings. They ignored marketing emails from Florida resorts and deleted Airbnbs from their travel folders. Their protest wasn't loud, it was deliberate. And that silence, that absence, is perhaps more powerful than any viral outrage could have been. In the halls of power, there's still a fundamental misunderstanding of how tourism and foreign investment work when it comes to long-term travelers. Politicians often talk about international visitors like they're all tourists, short-term, casual, replaceable. But snowbirds are different. These are semi-residents. They return to the same neighborhoods, use the same services, support the same businesses, year after year. Many of them spend more time in Florida than they do in their own cottages back in Canada. Their absence is like losing a full-time population, but one that leaves no safety net behind. Florida's local economies, especially in smaller, tourism-reliant towns, are beginning to feel the consequences. A marina in Punta Gorda that used to rent out dozens of boats each season to Canadian clients has seen a 70% drop in winter reservations. A small family-owned diner in Bonita Springs had to cut hours and let go of 2 staff members after January numbers came in 30% lower than expected. A community theater group in Venice Beach, once supported by a core group of Canadian patrons, is on the verge of shutting down its winter programming. The larger economy is beginning to ripple too. Florida's housing market, especially in condo-heavy snowbird regions, is showing early signs of oversupply. Listings are up, but interest is down. That puts downward pressure on prices and upward pressure on carrying costs. Some associations are facing funding shortfalls due to lost rental income and delayed sales, forcing fees higher for full-time residents. It's a cascading effect. Fewer snowbirds means fewer buyers, which means more inventory, which leads to price drops and budget cuts. That impacts property tax revenues, service contracts, and even city planning. Meanwhile, local governments and tourism authorities remain largely quiet. The response so far has been muted, if not dismissive. A few real estate firms have acknowledged the issue. Some regional chambers of commerce have hinted at rebranding strategies to attract more domestic retirees. But there's been no coordinated effort to win back Canadian confidence, largely because no one wants to say the part out loud that the damage is political. And perhaps most critically, the emotional wound still hasn't healed. Snowbirds didn't just stop coming because of Trump. They stopped coming because they watched a country they once loved change, and then double down on that change. Even as the economic numbers worsened, the cultural climate didn't improve. The annexation jokes never stopped. The rhetoric continued. The silence from political leadership persisted. And now, for many Canadians, the thought of returning to Florida feels less like a vacation and more like self-betrayal. To understand the permanence of this break, you have to understand Canadian identity. Canadians take pride in being polite, tolerant, and globally minded. They value diplomacy. They trust public institutions. And they see themselves as the antithesis of loud, brash, isolationist politics. When Trump mocked Trudeau, Canadians didn't just see it as an insult to their prime minister. They saw it as an insult to their entire political philosophy. When he called Canada a burden, or a joke, or implied that it was property to be acquired, that wasn't just rhetoric, it was a slap in the face to national pride. And while Americans are often told to ignore what Trump says, Canadians don't operate like that. Words matter. Tone matters. Respect matters. So when Canadian snowbirds say they no longer feel welcome, it's not because of a single policy. It's because of years of accumulated disrespect. Disrespect that went unanswered. Disrespect that was normalized. In 2025, with Trump once again a frontrunner, Canadians are reading the writing on the wall. They don't see this as a temporary phase. They see it as the new American identity. And they're responding not with outrage, but with exit. Quiet, deliberate exit. What does this mean for Florida's future? It means the state can no longer rely on the predictability of its most stable winter population. It means small businesses will have to adapt or fail. It means real estate markets will need to diversify and de-risk. It means entire communities that once revolved around seasonal migration will have to redefine themselves. And it means that without a serious shift in political tone, this trend is unlikely to reverse anytime soon. The bond between Canada and the US has always been more than just proximity. It was emotional. It was personal. It was built on mutual respect, shared values, and decades of goodwill. But that bond has been damaged, not just by tariffs or trade disputes, but by mockery, condescension, and silence in the face of it. And once broken, trust is hard to repair. Florida didn't just lose a tourism demographic. It lost a reliable population. A group of people who didn't just spend money, they built communities. Who didn't just visit, they returned. Who didn't just invest financially, but emotionally. And when they pulled out, they didn't leave quietly because they were indifferent. They left quietly because they were disappointed. For now, Florida still has its beaches. Still has its sun. Still has domestic tourism and migration from other parts of the US. But the gap left by the Canadian snowbird is one that won't be filled easily. And unless political leadership, both in the US and at the state level, begins to seriously reflect on how this happened, that gap may become permanent. This isn't just about one election cycle, or one leader. It's about a pattern, a direction. And for many Canadians, the message has been received, loud and clear. If you enjoyed this update, please like and subscribe as we post videos like this daily. That's all for now. See you in the next video.